morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Peter Iwanowitz. I'm with I'm the Executive Director of Environmental Advocates of New York. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today. We are here this morning to call for a Green Amendment to the New York State Constitution. We want to add just 15 eloquent but very powerful words to our Bill of Rights. We want these words to ensure that New York State will be forever known as a true environmental leader. We are seeking to add a right of clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment to our New York State Bill of Rights. Environmental advocates and other advocates have worked in communities like Hoosick Falls, the south end of Albany, Newburgh, and really any place we go, wherever our work takes us, people come up to us and think that they have a right to clean air or clean water or a healthful environment. And we say, well, as humans and morally, yes, you do have that right, but legally in New York, you don't. And often the next thing is saying, let's change that. They want to work with us and change that. New York State's Constitution guarantees a lot of great things. It's known as probably one of the most progressive Bill of Rights. It includes actually the right to, as you see over here, the right to play and host games of chance like bingo. And so, not to be too flippant about it, we think a right to clean water, clean air, and a healthful environment should be on par with the right to gamble and play games like bingo. But actually, it's silent on that issue of breathing clean air and drinking clean water. And most people, I think, will find this shocking. And today, we intend to change that. We're going to make sure our state constitution has the right to clean air and clean water and a healthful environment. And as we launch this campaign, I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we have a letter up there on the table in front of you that has more than 90 organizations signed on in support of the Green Amendment. These are community-based organizations. They are civic organizations. They are big national environmental groups, and they are big labor unions like the state AFL-CIO. And their 2.5 million members are endorsing this amazing piece of legislation today. And of course, the legislators who are championing this bill are with us this morning, and strong advocates. And I'm going to introduce them now to you and ask them to come up one at a time to just present some brief thoughts on pushing this Green Amendment. So first, I just want to introduce, in turn, as they're here, Assemblyman Dick Godfrey, many of you know, is the longstanding chair of the Assembly Health Committee, a co-prime of this legislation for the last 2 years. And I would say a sort of a personal sort of note of affection. He's sort of the guy that I knew is really understanding the role of New York State's Constitution as it relates to public health statute. I don't know if it's too much to call him a guru on that issue, but I remember as a young Lung Association employee, him schooling me on the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, and whether we should go after tobacco companies' billboards. And he was right then, and he's right today. With us also is Chairman Steve Engelbright. He's the chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee. He's been the lead sponsor in this bill for the last 3 years. He had shepherded this bill through successful votes in the last 2 years in the Assembly, and I would say successful bipartisan votes in the New York State Assembly. And I'm glad he's here with us. Also with us is Maya Van Rossum, who has literally written the book on the Green Amendment. She is the Delaware Riverkeeper, and she's with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And she's going to share her thoughts on not only New York's important role here, but what's else going on in the Green Amendment. Senator Carlucci is the strong environmental Senate sponsor of the bill. He's championed this thing in the Senate. And I know that he's really excited to have different Senate leadership because this bill is moved finally out of committee. And is where? Poised for passage on the Senate floor. That's right. Excellent, thanks. Also with us is Senator Comiskey, who is the chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee. And I think even before he was officially installed as chair, he and I had a conversation of this bill and said, yes, we need to do that. So I'm glad he's here with us. And also with us is Laura Bierman, sorry. My apologies.
That's all right.
With the League of Women Voters. And the wonderful thing about the Environmental Bill of Rights is it brings together civic groups, environmental organizations, as I mentioned, labor, and the strong ethos of groups like the League of Women Voters to support not only this good government thing, but the League of Women Voters. I don't think many folks know this, but you should. are really strong champions of environmental issues. I've worked with the League shoulder to shoulder for nearly 30 years in the halls of Albany, not only on things like good government things, but strong environmental standards. So I'm really happy that they're here with us today. So I will call up Chairman Engelbright to share his thoughts, and Senator, you'll go after Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Sometimes you hear the statement that there's no need to be redundant by restating the obvious. Actually, that's not true. Restating the obvious in law is part of what gives us predictability for a clean and healthful environment and society that has the ability to invest their lives into living in this great state. And this amendment addresses that issue. Very simple. Every New Yorker should have the right to clean air, water, and a healthful environment. Who could argue against that? And yet there are some who are arguing against it because they say it's redundant. Well, redundancy is good pedagogy, I learned as a teacher. And part of what putting this into law will do is reinforce the expectation of every citizen to know that if they invest their lives into living in our state, raise their children in this state, that it is an exercise in optimism. And that's exactly what this amendment is. I'm so very pleased to be joined with my colleagues who have now in the Senate begun to pioneer this same very simple concept in our journey to make this part of our state's constitution and part of the expectation of every citizen of the state. It's simple, but it's beautiful. And we should do it this year, and I think we will. Thank you very much.
Great job. Well, thank you. I'm Senator David Carlucci, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here today. And I want to thank Peter and all the advocates that have been working on this extremely important issue. And first, I want to thank Chairman Engelbright for bringing this forward, Chairman Gottfried for being here, and particularly Chairman Kaminsky for making this one of the first bills to move out of the Environmental Committee. And as we're talking about the New York State Constitution, this Constitution has 4 times the amount of words of the U.S. Constitution. Yet we're absent of the fact of one of the most important things we can do. Make sure that we have a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. It's true. We can play bingo under our state constitution. We even now have casino games that you can go to casinos in New York State. But yet we're absent of this critical importance that is important for the survival of our humanity. And we have to address the fact that climate change is real. And climate change is not some theory, not something off in the distant future, but we're experiencing it now in New York State every day. Places are flooding that didn't flood before. So we have to have all hands on deck to reverse the problems that we created here in New York State. We now have to unwind them. And one of the first things we can do is guarantee this right in our Constitution. The time is now. Our federal government is rolling back all the things that we have fought for over the years. The president has now rescinded the Paris Agreement, our agreement to the Paris Agreement. We see that the federal government, our president, has put forth a 30% reduction to the Environmental Protection Agency. So we as New York have to stand up, and we have to lead the way and show what can be done. And one of the most important things we can do is make it crystal clear that one of the things that will be protected for you and your family and for our children is the right to a clean and healthy environment. Look, we're cleaning up the Hudson River right now. And I have the wonderful privilege of representing both sides of the Hudson River in Rockland County and in Westchester County. And we used to have public beaches along the Hudson. And I work with students at the Ossining High School, and we test the water. And we're planning on one day reopening a beach in the Hudson River that people had enjoyed generations ago. And I asked the question to the students and to the young people, particularly in Ossining and the banks of the Hudson River, who does the Hudson belong to? Who does the Hudson River belong to? Does it belong to General Electric? Or does it belong to the people of New York State? And that's what we have to reaffirm in our Constitution to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect our air, to protect our water, and make sure we have a healthy environment. So I'm confident that this will be the year we move it through the legislature. We obviously then have to move it through the legislature again, but we want to make sure this is a question that the people of New York can respond to, that they have the choice. Let's put it to the people of New York in a referendum to say, do you want a constitutional amendment to protect your air, your water, and your environment? I think the answer will be yes. Let's do it. Let's get it done immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Carlucci. I think the sentiments are echoed now by the entire legislature that these fundamental rights need to be enshrined in our Constitution. I will just add a point that these are not just words to express the aspirations of our state, but the very arguments that the opponents have made over the years that prevented it from leaving the past Senate majority and then are still being made now is exactly what gives this force, is that average citizens will be able to use this legal tool to enforce those rights. And right now, when someone is subject to dirty water and dirty air and a polluted environment, they're often left without a legal remedy and a legal basis to fight to have those very fundamental rights that they know belong to them but cannot find a vehicle and a means through which to do anything about. That will change now, that our Constitution will soon have these rights enshrined in it. And someone will be able to legally use that as a basis to get the justice, environmental justice, which is sometimes the most important kind of justice in our society, fulfilled. So I'm really excited to see this in law. I hope this will be a cornerstone of our Senate Earth Day agenda in a few weeks. And I think we're really doing the right thing by the people of New York. And I believe in 2 years they will overwhelmingly affirm that. Thank you.
Chairman Godfrey.
Thank you. All this talk about the state constitution reminds me that a long, long time ago in the summer of 1967, I was a student intern here in Albany at the State Constitutional Convention, an enterprise that did not produce much in terms of actual result. But anyway, New York's Constitution has some very important things in it, and those things make a real difference. Every night there are thousands of homeless people in New York who get to sleep in a shelter thanks to the New York State Constitution's social welfare section, which courts are able to enforce. And there are people in New York who have Medicaid coverage because we have a protection of the public health article in the state constitution that New York courts are able to enforce and do. And with this effort, we will have those 8 wonderful words, clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment in the state constitution that our courts will be able to enforce. It's hard to imagine anything really more fundamental to the life of New Yorkers for generations to come, in greater peril now than ever. Hard to imagine anything more important than getting this amendment enacted.
Hi, I'm Maya Van Rossum. I'm the Delaware Riverkeeper, leader of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. I also wrote a book titled The Green Amendment, and as a result, we've actually sparked a national movement called Green Amendments for the Generations. And in all of those roles, I am so pleased to be here to support the advancement of a New York Green Amendment. Actually, with this proposal, New York is poised to become just one of 3 states in the United States of America that has a Green Amendment. What's a Green Amendment? Well, a Green Amendment is a provision that's added to the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. It's self-executing, and it recognizes and protects the inalienable right to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment, and grants these rights the same legal recognition and protection that we grant to those other political, civil, and human rights that we hold dear, like the right to free speech, the right to freedom of religion, due process rights, and private property rights, for example. Now, there are, in fact, over 40 other states that talk about the environment in their constitutions, but they do not rise to the level of being a Green Amendment. They don't talk about the right to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment in the Bill of Rights section of their constitution. Or they talk about environmental protection as good public policy, or something that's entitled to the passage of state legislation in order to protect it. But they don't recognize and protect the right to a healthy environment as an inalienable right on par with those other fundamental freedoms. The other two states the two states that currently have a Green Amendment are Pennsylvania and Montana. That's it. Now, in addition to New York, we do have 3 other states that have Green Amendment proposals. New York, Maryland, and West Virginia have proposals as well. But I would say that New York is leading the pack when it comes to advancing this important provision. The passage of a New York Green Amendment will give New York legislators and regulators an important tool to advance meaningful and needed environmental protection. It will prevent decisions and actions and legislation that undermine environmental protection and, as a result, violate people's rights to a healthy environment. It will absolutely strengthen environmental justice because it will ensure that all people in the state of New York, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their income level, regardless of where they live, have the same right to clean water, clean air, and a healthful environment. And it will fill the gaps in the law, right, where we do not have needed environmental protections currently in place. So if you think about PFOA, contamination of drinking water supplies, for example, if we had a New York Green Amendment in place years ago, perhaps we could have fended off the contamination of people's drinking water supplies before it even happened. Or if it did happen and we had a New York Green Amendment, we could have taken stronger, swifter action to clean up people's drinking water supplies and give them access to the clean water that they're entitled to. Now, there are people in New York, unbelievably, that are opposed to the passage of a New York Green Amendment. And 3 of the primary arguments that I've heard in New York, frankly, and in other states, is that if we pass a Green Amendment, we're going to have an onslaught of frivolous litigation, or that we're going to stop all economic development. Nobody's going to be able to drive a car anymore. Nobody is going to be able to build a patio in their backyard, right? Everything will stop dead in its tracks. Or they assert that the language that has been proposed is too broad to be implementable. And I want to assure you that on all of these fronts, these are just red herrings. There's not going to be an onslaught of frivolous litigation. Attorneys are bound by legal standards and ethical rules that prevent unfounded legal challenges from advancing. And if you look at Pennsylvania and Montana, we do not have this onslaught of frivolous litigation that everybody cries about. When it comes to economic development, a New York Green Amendment is going to strengthen economic development. There's so much research, right, to show that a healthy economy is dependent upon a healthy environment. All a New York Green Amendment is going to do is ensure that as government officials look to advance economic development and business objectives, that they find a way to do it that protects the environment at the same time. And that's always doable. It's always doable. The other thing is not only will the Green Amendment advance healthy, clean, green economic growth, but it will save on the tremendous costs and human suffering that result from contaminated water, polluted air, increased exposure to dangerous toxins, increasing flooding and flood damages that result from environmental degradation, and so much more. And finally, the proposed New York Green Amendment does have the detail needed to protect environmental rights. The New York courts are well equipped to define and protect the right to clean water, clean air, and a healthful environment, just as they are well equipped to protect against excessive bails and fines, to protect the right to speak freely, to protect the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, to protect against the taking of life and liberty without due process. Environmental rights can and will be interpreted, defined, and protected in the same way courts interpret, define, and protect these other broadly described environmental rights. And I just want to say that the Pennsylvania and Montana courts have effectively interpreted and applied constitutional green amendments in those states. There's no reason to believe that New York courts will be any less capable. So I just want to thank I just want to thank the New York legislators, right? Chairman Engelbright, Chairman Gottfried, Chairman Kaminsky, Senator Carlucci, for advancing New York's Green Amendment at such a critical time in our state's history and our nation's history. Thank you so much.
Yep. Hi, I'm Laura Ladd-Bierman. I'm Executive Director of the League of Women Voters. As Peter had mentioned, we have worked on environmental issues for many years, and many people do not even know that. But this is one item that we couldn't avoid. This is an issue that all New Yorkers deserve. How can you be against clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment? People deserve this. All of New Yorkers want it. We need to make sure it's enshrined in our Constitution for all of the state. I want to thank the legislators who are providing the leadership and hopefully the success of this amendment, and we'll work with them to get it passed when we get to the referendum stage. So thank you.
We'll open it up for questions if folks have them. I know we've provided a lot of information. We may have already answered the questions, but. Great. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.